Zalor had been to many worlds, but none as strange as this one from his vantage point. Earth seemed almost insignificant, a small blue planet barely visible among the vastness of the galaxy, yet his mission was clear: observe, assess, and determine the threat level of the humans who lived on it. He had read the reports. They were primitive, not even capable of faster-than-light travel, barely mastering the tools of their own environment. They had no advanced technologies, no remarkable resources, nothing to suggest they could pose any real danger to the Zircon Empire, a race that had conquered countless star systems and wiped out species far more sophisticated than this pathetic planet below him. Yet something in the back of Zalor's mind whispered that perhaps he had underestimated them. Perhaps this small, insignificant world held a deeper secret, one that could surprise him. He leaned forward in his chair, the observation room dimly lit by the soft glow of the control panels scattered across the floor. His crew stood quietly behind him, monitoring the vast array of sensors designed to scan the planet and its inhabitants. But Zalor's focus was elsewhere. His attention was drawn to a modest suburban area on the surface of Earth, a location that seemed almost out of place for a species he thought to be so backward. His gaze zeroed in on a house nestled on a quiet street, where through the windows of the structure he saw the flicker of lights and the unmistakable shapes of human figures moving about inside. Zalor was puzzled. Why had his sensors picked this one house? Why was he suddenly so drawn to this particular spot? He had seen thousands of similar homes in his brief observations. Why this one? Why now? His fingers tapped lightly on the surface of his control panel, giving the command to zoom in on the house below. The image sharpened, instantly revealing a family. Inside there was a man and woman seated on the couch chatting casually, but Zalor's attention was immediately captured by the figure of a child sitting cross-legged on the floor. The child was no more than 10 years old and seemed to be engrossed in some sort of digital display in front of them. Zalor adjusted his sensors, focusing even closer. He could now make out the screen on which the child was playing. It was a Starship simulator, a game of some kind, the likes of which were common across many civilizations in the galaxy. It was simple enough. The child was controlling a digital vessel through an asteroid field, dodging obstacles and engaging in combat with other simulated ships. Nothing about this seemed noteworthy at first glance, but something about the way the child played caught Zalor off guard. The child wasn't just moving through the game in a routine fashion like most humans would. There was something more. The movements were deliberate, calculated, yet fluid. The child seemed to anticipate the paths of the enemy ships almost instinctively. There was a focus in their eyes, something Zalor couldn't quite place, a hint of intelligence that went beyond mere reaction. It was as if the child wasn't just playing the game, but was living it, navigating it with a purpose that made Zalor pause for a moment. He had seen many military strategies across the galaxy, but what was happening in this small house on Earth felt different. It felt more like something that couldn't be predicted, something that wasn't bound by the simple mechanics of the game itself. This wasn't just a child playing the simulation. This was something else entirely. Zalor's eyes never left the screen as the child's fingers danced across the controls faster than any human hand should have been capable of moving. The simulated Starship now dodged a laser blast from an incoming enemy vessel with a precision that made Zalor's breath catch in his throat. It was as though the child had already predicted the enemy's move before it had even been made. The ship veered left just in time to avoid the deadly beam. As if guided by instinct alone, the game's simple algorithmic logic seemed incapable of accounting for such foresight. The child's eyes flickered for a moment as they adjusted to the next set of obstacles. Suddenly, the ship was plunged into an asteroid field that had been designed to overwhelm even the most skilled players. But instead of panicking or hesitating, the child calmly surveyed the chaos on screen and began to weave the ship through the swirling rocks with a fluidity that could only be described as effortless. Zalor watched as the child's mind worked on a level he hadn't anticipated. Each movement was calculated, each choice purposeful. The ship dodged left, then right, with the precision of a veteran pilot. Every time an asteroid neared, it was destroyed before it could become a threat. And just as the child was closing in on the final segment of the field, an enemy warship appeared out of nowhere. Zalor's sensors were already analyzing the game's parameters, trying to predict the enemy's next move. But the child was already steps ahead. The warship fired on the child's ship, but instead of running or trying to avoid the blasts, the child took a sharp dive towards the enemy ship, diving through the barrage of enemy fire with unbelievable skill. Sailor felt his heart rate spike as he realized the child was using the enemy's aggression against them. The ship's shields held steady as the child expertly closed the distance, until finally, with a well-timed strike, the child's ship disabled the enemy vessel in a single maneuver that left Sailor speechless. The child's score flashed up on the screen, marking the end of the simulation, but Sailor could not tear his eyes away. The result was clear: the child had won. But it wasn't just that the child had won, it was how they had done it. The ability to think beyond the game's limitations, to adapt to the unknown, and exploit weaknesses with such precision was beyond anything Sailor had expected from a species he thought to be incapable of such complexity. It didn't make sense. The game was a simple simulation meant to test reflexes and pattern recognition, but the child had turned it into a battlefield, a display of tactical genius that was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Sailor leaned back in his chair as his mind raced. This was no ordinary human. The child wasn't just playing a game. They were using strategies and instincts that resembled the tactical genius of an experienced commander in a real war. The child wasn't following the rules, they were bending them, shifting the flow of the game into something far more dynamic, something unpredictable, something dangerous. And suddenly Sailor understood that the human species might be more than he had initially believed. Their true power wasn't in their technology or resources, it was in their minds, their capacity for innovation and strategy, something that could never be measured by algorithms alone. The child's performance was proof that humanity's strength was in their ability to think creatively, to adapt quickly to the unexpected, and to outmaneuver their enemies in ways that were impossible to predict. Sailor's mind raced as he continued to watch the child's gameplay, the implications of what he had just witnessed stirring unease deep within him. This wasn't just a fluke, a random stroke of luck. The way the child adapted, outmaneuvered the enemy, and turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Sailor had watched countless simulations in his life, observing the military exercises of many species across the galaxy, but never had he encountered such a raw, untapped potential in one so young. He replayed the battle in his mind again, searching for a logical explanation, but there was none. The child had broken every pattern Sailor expected, evaded every trap, and defeated an entire enemy fleet using methods that didn't follow conventional strategies. It wasn't just intelligence, it was an instinctual understanding of how to win against overwhelming odds. For a brief moment, Sailor questioned everything he thought he knew about humanity. Could it be possible? Could a species as seemingly primitive as this one truly possess a deep, untapped well of strategic genius? A low growl of frustration rumbled in his throat. The child's actions weren't just impressive, they were unnerving. Humans, so far behind in technology, had still managed to create a mind capable of seeing beyond the limitations of their world and into the realm of true, complex warfare. Sailor's gaze remained locked on the child's screen as another round began. This time, the simulation shifted. An entirely new set of variables introduced to challenge the player's adaptability. The child didn't hesitate for a moment. Without any apparent pause, the ship zipped forward into the fray, dodging lasers and weaving through clusters of enemy ships. Each maneuver was swift, calculated, and precise. But what caught Sailor off guard again was the way the child handled the unexpected. When an enemy ship unexpectedly warped behind the child's vessel, the child didn't panic. They didn't try to escape or make a futile attempt at defense. Instead, the child executed a sharp turn, outflanking the enemy and leading it into a carefully laid trap of their own creation. The move was bold, creative, and utterly unpredictable. Sailor leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He was no longer just watching a child play a game. He was watching a tactical mind at work, crafting strategies that were beyond the scope of what anyone could have predicted. This child wasn't just reacting to the simulation. The child was thinking ahead. designing a battlefield where their every move was calculated to ensure success. How was it possible for such a young mind to operate at such a high level? The child's quickness, their ability to analyze in real time, and their unshakable confidence spoke of something far beyond the simple rules of a game. Zeller knew that this wasn't just a display of reflexes, it was the early signs of something more dangerous. This child could become a master strategist, capable of leading entire fleets, devising plans that would challenge even the mightiest of empires. It wasn't just this child, it was humanity as a whole that might have this same untapped potential. As the game reached its climax, Sailor realized something profound. The child had turned a simple artificial scenario into a complex, real-world situation. The child wasn't following the simulation's design. The simulation was bending to the child's will. The implications of this were vast. If a single human child could grasp the intricacies of warfare with such skill and intuition, what would happen when this natural ability was honed, when it was put to work in real-life combat situations? Sailor couldn't ignore it anymore. The time for underestimating humanity was over. The child had not only proved that humans were capable of innovation, but that they had a unique form of adaptability and resilience that no other species could match. And if humanity could do this in a game, what else could they do when faced with the true weight of battle? Zeller sat back, his mind reeling from what he had just witnessed. His mission, which had seemed so straightforward, was beginning to unravel. The child's extraordinary display of skill was no longer just a curiosity. It was a signal, a warning. The humans, despite their primitive technology, had a natural gift that far outstripped any advantage their species had anticipated. The child's gameplay was no longer just about the game. It was about the mind behind it. The ability to think several moves ahead, to analyze and adapt to the ever-changing chaos of battle. Zeller felt a tremor of realization course through him. If this was the potential of a single human, then what of humanity as a whole? What kind of untapped force had he been sent to assess? His eyes remained fixed on the screen. The child had just completed another level of the simulator, this time navigating an asteroid field while fending off waves of attacking ships. But this was no ordinary run. The simulation had been designed to overwhelm even the most skilled players, a test of patience, precision, and survival under extreme pressure. The asteroid field was densely packed, and the enemy ships were relentless in their pursuit, more numerous than ever before. Zeller expected the child to falter, to lose control under the pressure. Instead, the child did the unthinkable. The ship surged forward, breaking through the field with startling speed, weaving through rocks and debris with a grace that seemed almost impossible for someone so young. The child's decisions were quick but deliberate, precise but daring. The child used the asteroids as shields, angling the ship in ways that not only avoided the rocks, but also confused the enemy ships, forcing them into each other's fire. With a sudden, fluid motion, the child maneuvered the ship into a narrow gap in the field, blasting through the final obstacle just as the enemy ships closed in, annihilating them in one swift move. The score flashed on the screen, marking yet another flawless victory. Zailer's breath caught in his chest. He had seen nothing like it. Not in humans, not in any species. His first instinct was to dismiss it, to write it off as a lucky streak, a momentary glitch in the simulation. But there was no glitch. This child was operating on a level Zeller couldn't comprehend. The patterns, the strategies, the decisions. It wasn't just reflex. It was something deeper, something intrinsic to the child's understanding of the world. Zeller began to wonder, what if this was only a glimpse? What if this child's potential, when properly nurtured, could rival the greatest military minds of the galaxy? A shudder ran through him. It was one thing to encounter a talented individual. It was another to face an entire species that could produce minds like this. Unable to shake the feeling that he was witnessing the birth of something new, Zeller increased his surveillance. He focused on the child's environment, trying to understand what influenced their thinking. The child lived in a simple home, surrounded by the noise and chaos of family life. No advanced training, no military tactics. Yet, somehow, this child had unlocked the secrets of strategy, war, and ingenuity, skills that took others entire lifetimes to master. Zalor couldn't explain it, but it was undeniable. Humanity, despite its primitive tools and simple ways, was capable of a genius that could change the fate of entire civilizations. His mind raced through the possibilities. Was this ability inherent in all humans? Had he simply been too quick to dismiss them as weak and helpless? Or was this child something more, something extraordinary? He thought back to his early studies of human history, their battles, their conquests, their ingenuity. The stories were scattered, fragmented, but there was one constant. No matter the odds, humanity had a unique way of surviving, of pushing through, of adapting. And it was that ability to adapt, to think beyond the rules, to invent new solutions to insurmountable problems. That was their real power. And it wasn't just this child. It was all humans. Zalor realized. They had the potential to grow, to evolve into something much more formidable than he had imagined. The implications were staggering. The Zircon Empire had prepared for war, for domination. But this was different. Humanity wasn't just a species to be crushed underfoot. Humanity was a species to be reckoned with. Zalor's heart pounded in his chest. The game had changed. Zalor's thoughts spiraled as he watched the child's game unfold. What he had once dismissed as a harmless distraction had become a mirror to a much larger and far more unsettling truth. The child was playing, yes, but they were also thinking, calculating, and adapting in ways that no one had anticipated. For a fleeting moment, Zalor considered the possibility that humanity was not simply a species to be conquered, but one whose untapped potential could disrupt the carefully laid plans of the Zircon Empire. How many more children like this were there on Earth? Was the brilliance displayed here unique, or was it merely the tip of a vast and unpredictable iceberg? Zalor couldn't shake the feeling that his understanding of humanity had been fundamentally flawed. He had assumed that a species without advanced technology or spacefaring capabilities was insignificant, that their place in the galaxy would always be one of subjugation, not negotiation. But watching this child, he couldn't ignore the gnawing question. Could it be that humanity's true strength lay not in their machines or their physical might, but in their minds, their ability to adapt, to improvise, to think in ways that no other species had ever been able to? Zalor glanced at the data reports running on his console. He was no longer just watching a game. He was watching something much larger, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. He saw it now. The key to humanity's strength wasn't in their technology, nor was it in their raw power. It was in their creativity, their ability to think on their feet, to make the most of whatever resources they had, to outmaneuver the impossible. That child had proven it. Strategy was their natural language, their survival instinct. The child's success wasn't just about speed or reaction time. It was about how the child constructed the future, how they could foresee obstacles and shape the outcome in ways that defied logic, but never failed. It became clear to Zalor that humanity's military history, its endless battles and wars, wasn't just about brute force. No, it was about innovation, about inventing new tactics, new ways of fighting, and outsmarting an enemy that expected only the conventional. Zalor had witnessed it with his own eyes. The child had outwitted the simulation's designed algorithms, manipulating the system's own limitations to their advantage. And what was even more alarming was the simplicity of it. There was no need for complex technology or overwhelming numbers. All it took was a mind capable of thinking several steps ahead, an ability that was as rare as it was dangerous. The realization sent a cold shiver down Zalor's spine. What if this was not an isolated event? What if this ability was something widespread among humans? If they could think their way out of seemingly impossible situations, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The implications for the Zircon Empire were terrifying. They had built their empire on the foundation of military dominance, on the strength of their advanced technology, and their ability to crush any opposition. But what if the humans didn't need advanced technology to fight back? What if their true weapon was something intangible, something far more elusive, a mind capable of bending the rules of reality itself? Unable to contain his thoughts any longer, Xailor summoned his closest advisors to a council meeting. He knew the discussions would be difficult, that they would be met with resistance. The Zircon Empire had long prided itself on its superiority, and to admit that a species like humanity could challenge them in any meaningful way was anathema to their core beliefs. But Xailor's observations were irrefutable. The child's gameplay was proof of a deeper, unspoken truth about humanity. They could outthink their enemies, no matter how advanced. The only question left was, how long would it take before this ability spread beyond one child to an entire species? How long before humanity realized the power they held in their minds? Xailor's heart raced as he prepared to relay this new information to his superiors. He knew that the Zircon Empire had always seen themselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. But the truth he had discovered today shattered that illusion. The Zircon had underestimated the most dangerous aspect of humanity, their unyielding capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to overcome any obstacle that stood in their way. Xailor was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength was not in what they had but in what they could become. And that was something the Zircon Empire might not be ready for. The Emergency Council convened in a chamber deep within the heart of Xailor's flagship, a place where decisions of great consequence were made. Xailor stood at the head of a massive circular table surrounded by his fellow commanders, military strategists, and political officers of the Zircon Empire. The air was heavy with anticipation, for Xailor had requested this meeting urgently, and no one in the room knew exactly why. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism, as the Zircon had never shown any genuine concern about the humans of Earth. To them, Earth was nothing more than a speck in the vast ocean of the galaxy, a primitive world whose fate had already been sealed. But Xailor had a different story to tell, one that could alter the course of their plans entirely. As the officers took their seats, Xailor tapped a series of controls on the display, and the image of the child's game flashed across the room. His audience gasped in unison, their eyes narrowing as the child's seemingly effortless victories played out before them. The war simulations, once thought of as nothing more than an amusing curiosity, now had the commanders on edge. Each maneuver, each unexpected tactic, every victory unnerved them further. The child was not just playing a game. The child was thinking beyond the game's design, reshaping the rules in ways that no algorithm could account for. "We've made a grave mistake," Xailor began, his voice steady, but his mind racing. "We have underestimated the humans." A murmur rippled through the room. The other leaders exchanged skeptical glances, but Xailor continued, "I've spent hours analyzing this child's performance. This is no ordinary game. What you see here is the demonstration of a mind capable of thinking several steps ahead, creating strategies that would take our greatest commanders years to perfect. The child is not just playing. The child is bending the game to their will." "But this is a game," Xailor, one of the military strategists, interjected, his voice dripping with disbelief. "A child playing a simulation. It means nothing. Our empire has seen real war, real strategy. This is irrelevant." Xailor's eyes flashed with impatience. "This is not irrelevant. The child's ability to think outside the confines of the game is the key. It's not the technology or firepower that sets them apart. It's their mind their ability to adapt, innovate, and outmaneuver." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I believe this is a pattern that extends beyond this single individual. Humanity is not bound by the limits of their technology. They don't rely solely on their weapons or tools. They rely on their creativity. There was a silence in the room. The commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Zayler's words were beginning to sink in, and with them came the growing realization that their understanding of humanity had been deeply flawed. The child's success wasn't about reflexes or combat skill. It was about ingenuity, the ability to approach war in ways that no one had ever considered. "We cannot ignore this," Zayler continued. "If this child can perform like this with such raw talent, then imagine what a fully trained human, one who has been taught to use these abilities, could do. We may have an entire race of people who can outthink us, outmaneuver us, even in the most dire of situations." "Are you suggesting we hold off on the invasion?" Another officer asked cautiously, his brow furrowed. "Are you advising we negotiate with them?" Zayler shook his head slowly. "No, I'm suggesting we take humanity's potential seriously. We are dealing with something entirely new. We've always been able to crush inferior species beneath our boot. But what if humanity's strength isn't in their size or their weapons, but in their minds? What if they can outsmart us, outthink us, no matter what we bring to bear?" The room fell silent again. The magnitude of what Zayler was saying was becoming clear. The Zircon Empire had never faced an opponent like this. The child's display had opened their eyes to a terrifying possibility. Humanity was not to be underestimated. One of the senior commanders, a grizzled veteran of countless campaigns, finally spoke. "What do you suggest we do now, Zayler? How do we deal with this threat?" Zayler looked around the room, his gaze hardening with determination. "We must study them. We need more data. The child's performance was exceptional, yes, but I need to see if this is a skill that can be replicated across a population. We will begin a program of observation, targeting children, young adults, anyone who shows signs of this level of intelligence. If we can understand their potential, we may be able to find a way to neutralize it." "And if we can't?" another officer asked, his voice low with a hint of concern. Zayler stared at the screen, the image of the child's final victory still burning in his mind. "Then we prepare for a war unlike any we've ever fought." The days that followed the council meeting were filled with a growing sense of urgency. Zayler had succeeded in convincing the higher-ups of the Zircon Empire to shift their focus. No longer would humanity be treated as a footnote in the grand scheme of their expansion. They had to be studied, understood, and if necessary, neutralized before they could become a serious threat. A new program was swiftly put into place, one that involved deep surveillance and covert observation. Zayler had ordered the deployment of specialized reconnaissance teams, using both subtle and overt methods to track human behavior across the planet. Every corner of Earth was being monitored now. Every school, every community, every gathering where human children might be found. The child from the simulation was not the anomaly. Zayler believed they were the first sign of a much larger pattern. Despite the overwhelming resources now devoted to watching humanity, there was a nagging feeling that Zayler couldn't shake. The more he watched, the more he realized that humanity's strength lay in their adaptability, but also in their unpredictability. He had seen the way the child had approached the Starship simulation, how they defied the rules, how they saw the world differently. But what if it wasn't just the child? What if every human, in their own way, possessed this same uncanny ability to challenge the impossible? As Zayler continued to analyze the data coming in from his reconnaissance teams, he became more and more disturbed. The children he was observing were not all displaying the same advanced tactical mind as the one he had seen in the simulation, but there was something else. An inherent restlessness, a thirst for discovery, a desire to push beyond their current limits. He watched as young humans tinkered with machines, invented new ways of solving problems, and adapted to their circumstances in ways no other species had ever done before. Even in their seemingly trivial endeavors, humanity was constantly striving to improve. It was in their very nature to question, to explore, to innovate. And that, Sailor realized, was what made them so dangerous. It wasn't just their minds, sharp as they were. It was their willingness to constantly evolve. The Zircon, for all their technological superiority, had a rigid hierarchy. They relied on the tried and true methods of conquest, of overwhelming force, of domination. But humanity, they would adapt. They would innovate. And no matter how much technology or brute strength the Zircon could throw at them, humanity would find a way to overcome it. Weeks passed, and the surveillance continued. In one remote region of the planet, Zaller's team discovered something even more unsettling. A group of young humans, barely out of childhood, had managed to hack into a series of advanced communications networks, overriding security protocols and accessing confidential information. They weren't merely following in the footsteps of others. They were thinking for themselves, taking their skills beyond what their education had taught them. Sailor was astonished. They were doing things that no species of their technological level should have been capable of. He brought the report to his superiors, but their reaction was one of disbelief, even mockery. The idea that a few human children had breached high-level security seemed laughable to many of them. But Sailor knew better. This was no longer about the strength of humanity's weapons or the raw power of their armies. This was about their minds, their ability to think past the boundaries of their own limitations. If these children could do this with such rudimentary tools, what could humanity achieve once they unlocked the true potential of their own capabilities? Zaller's unease deepened with every passing day. The Zircon Empire had prided itself on its ability to conquer worlds with overwhelming might and calculated precision. But against an enemy that could think, that could adapt and evolve at such a rapid pace, the Empire's strategies seemed suddenly brittle, fragile, vulnerable. Zaller realized that a new kind of war was emerging, one that could not be fought with lasers, ships, or overwhelming force alone. This was a war of minds, and humanity, it seemed, was already years ahead of the Zircon. Zaller's thoughts turned inward, his gaze distant as he considered the future. The time for underestimating humanity was over. It was no longer a question of whether they could win. It was a question of how to defeat them, of how to stop a species whose greatest strength was their unyielding ability to adapt. Zaller clenched his fists, determination rising within him. There would be no simple conquest. This would be a battle of wits, and for the first time, Zaller wasn't sure if the Zircon Empire could emerge victorious. The final report came through late one night, a set of encrypted transmissions intercepted from a human military base. Zaller sat alone in his quarters, the weight of what he had seen crashing down on him like a storm. The humans were no longer simply using their minds to survive. They were now actively using them to challenge everything the Zircon Empire stood for. The encrypted files revealed something even more troubling. Humanity had begun to develop a new kind of warfare, one based not just on tactics, but on psychological manipulation. They had learned to influence their enemies before battles even began, subtly sowing distrust and confusion in the ranks of their adversaries. The child's display had been only the beginning. Humanity had recognized their strength, and they were using it to reshape the very nature of conflict. Zaller leaned forward, his eyes scanning the data. The human concept of war had evolved far beyond the conventional understanding of violence and combat. They had begun to use propaganda, misinformation, and manipulation with devastating precision, confusing entire armies and forcing them to question their own leaders. These tactics were alien to the Zircon. For the first time, Zaller understood that humanity had no interest in simply winning battles. They wanted to break their enemies mentally, to dismantle their will to fight before the first shot was even fired. This was a war of perception, not just firepower. A war of thought. Zaller's mind reeled. The implications of this discovery were vast, and the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. The Zircon Empire could not win this war the way they had won every other conflict. They had underestimated the adaptability and intelligence of humanity. They had assumed that brute force and superior technology would be enough, but they had been wrong. This was a fight for survival, not just for humanity, but for the very future of the galaxy itself. As Xalor mulled over his options, a sense of dread crept over him. What was he supposed to do now? The Zircon Empire had always prided itself on its strength, its unyielding power. But power alone was no longer enough. To face humanity, they would have to think. They would have to outwit an enemy who could outthink them at every turn. And what was worse, Xalor realized, was that humanity was not simply reacting to the Zircon Empire's actions. They were anticipating them, preparing for them before the first strike was even made. It was no longer a question of what humanity could do. It was a question of what they would do. Every move humanity made felt like it was part of a larger, grander plan. Xalor realized with chilling certainty that the child he had observed was not an isolated case. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest strategist, was capable of this kind of thinking. And if that was true, the Zircon Empire was facing an enemy that could learn, adapt, and evolve faster than any of them. The silence in Xalor's quarters felt deafening as he processed the gravity of the situation. The Empire had launched its campaign against Earth, certain that victory was within reach. But now, Xalor wasn't so sure. The humans weren't just a target to be destroyed. They were an enemy that could change the game. No longer could the Zircon expect victory based on their usual tactics. This would be a different kind of war, one in which the lines between strategy and deception, between reality and perception, were increasingly blurred. Xalor stood up, pacing back and forth. There was only one course of action left. He couldn't lead the Zircon Empire into a battle where they would be outmaneuvered at every turn. No, he had to change the way they approached this war. They needed to understand humanity's mind, how it worked, how it thought, how it adapted, and use that understanding to counter the very thing that made humans so dangerous. It was no longer just about technology. It was about psychology. Xalor paused in his tracks, a sudden realization hitting him. Perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't too late. Maybe there was a way to turn humanity's greatest strength against them, to twist the very thing that made them formidable into their downfall. The child had shown him that humanity's strength was their adaptability. But what if that adaptability could be used to lead them into a trap of their own making? A slow smile curled on Xalor's lips. If the humans could outthink the Zircon, then perhaps the Zircon could outthink them too. And if Xalor could manipulate that same adaptability, that same instinct to survive and evolve, he might just find a way to beat humanity at its own game. The war was not over. It had just begun.